Before anything else, I'm hella sorry about how long this took. My mental health always takes a sharp decline around the holidays, and I didn't want that to impact the quality of the video. If you or somebody you know is struggling, I encourage you to seek out the suicide prevention hotline for your country. And if your country doesn't have one, then please just hold on for as long as you can. You do matter. If you're in the United States like me, you can dial 988 at any time to find support. I play a lot of action sports games around here. That's not really a surprise to anybody, since most of you are here for those games, but what might be surprising is that we've still only covered 2 inline skating games throughout all of this. That feels kind of like an injustice to the sport on my part, and I'm in the mood for some fruit booting today, so we're going to take a look at Jet Set Radio. I'm playing the Steam version because that's the version I own, so hopefully it isn't too different from the original release, but that isn't all. We're also going to take a look at Jet Set Radio Future. Thank you to everybody who suggested these games, and I'm sorry again that it took so long, but I did say I wanted to get it done this year, and I mean that. So let's get started. Jet Set Radio, originally released as Jet Grind Radio for the Dreamcast in 2000, is an action sports collectathon platformer with a few other ideas. The development team here originally began their life as Smilebit, one of 9 more independent studios held under the umbrella of Sega. Later on, they changed face to Sega Sports Research and Development, and then finally in 2008, they became defunct. Sega moved around a lot of their development at that time, and a lot of the sports stuff got offloaded onto the CS1 and CS2 teams. Many of the team members are still actively working in the development space today, including the chief programmer Kazuhisa Hasuoka. His most recent work was on Like a Dragon Ishin in 2023, and before that he worked on quite a few of the Yakuza titles. I have to be honest here, I have never played Jet Set Radio for more than a few minutes prior to making this video, so this is a zero nostalgia review. This game has been hyped to hell and back by friends, viewers, reviewers, and the world over, so I'm absolutely going to hold it to that standard. Normally I set my expectations really low, but in this case I've been given every reason to keep them high, so I hope it isn't a disappointment. The story here is a classic tale of rebellion. Japan is full of really terrible laws, which is true to real life, and a mega conglomerate is policing the streets with a literal army to enforce those laws, which is a little Orwellian, so also not too far from real life these days. Amid the dystopian stranglehold of the public is a variety of rollerblading gangs armed to the teeth with graffiti cans and teen angst. The idea is really simple. Tag the hell out of everything. Tag the rival gang tags, the empty spaces, billboards, rooftops, helicopters, and pretty much everything else. As the game goes on and you progress through the various gang territories, your own little gang of misfits recruits new riders with different stats to make the later game a little bit easier. In between finishing a level and starting a new one, we're met with these really charming cutscenes of the Jet Set Radio DJ talking about the various gangs and the world around you and your progress. He'll follow up on everything you do and drop small hints at what comes next, and it's all really charming. I'll admit, it's all very cheesy, but it's a really good theme style that works well with the sport in question. The vibes are hip-hop and graffiti, so the mood of every situation does well to match that. I guess the only thing I don't really understand is why a megacorporation would need to send a literal army of tanks, helicopters, and machine gun-wielding soldiers to deal with a few skater punks. But understanding it isn't really the point, I guess. The point is to just sink in and accept it. The gameplay here is bad. I mean that in the most loving and compassionate way possible. But seriously, it's bad. I've had plenty of experience, not only with action sports games, but also with platformers, and I can confidently say that this game controls like complete shit. Before anything else, the movement itself is fine on the ground. It's not nearly as floaty like something like Airblade, but not nearly as fluid as any Pro Skater or similar title. But that is the best thing I can say about this whole experience. Jumping's done with the bottom face button, which is standard for every game ever made, so they got that right. But the actual jump feels a lot like Yanya Kabbalista in that it's not a good thing. I'm not sure why the gravity is so low, but aiming for rails and platforms is a task all on its own because apparently we're skating on the fucking moon out here. Next, rails and grinding are pretty lame. I hate the idea of automatic grind, and in this case, it's especially bad because there are buttons on the controller that literally aren't even used for anything. Automatically grinding in a game like Tony Hawk Ride and Shred made sense because you are standing on the board and trying to hit it with precision like a real skateboard. In this case, just map a fucking button to it. It might not seem like a big deal, but it's a limitation of freedom in a game that's themed entirely around freedom. Speaking of limitations, tricks happen automatically when you jump on certain things, and I think you can control them to a very small degree, but I'm not sure. I'm not even sure why they're there. There aren't that many tricks to play with, and there's practically no control over them. It's a cosmetic thing to make you feel like you're playing an action sports game when really all you're doing is pressing jump, holding run, and moving around. Apparently you can ride fakie. I'm not entirely sure why this happens or how to force it, but it doesn't matter because it's completely useless. Tapping jump on a wall will send you into a wall ride, but only on very, very specific walls. The The only way to combo any tricks together is by going from rail to rail to wall to rail, and eventually you run out of pieces. So you cannot really carry a massive combination of anything here if you're in it for the action sports side. Pulling the right trigger will do a small speed boost, which is necessary to do pretty much everything. It's the run button. I'm not sure why they didn't take the Sonic the Hedgehog route where you just move forward and build momentum to gain speed, but I do have an idea. It's another illusion to make you feel like this game actually has more interaction than it has. I don't fucking get it. You have to do that to maintain speed, but pressing a grind button was too complicated. What in the world? A single dedicated trick button was too much to work with, but the equivalent of a platformer's run button? Absolutely essential. I'm not the only person who thinks this is silly, right? But the silliness doesn't end there. This game has one primary objective, and that is to tag every red arrow around the map within the time limit. To do that, you have to pick up graffiti cans constantly, so it's sort of like a puzzle, but the problem with that is that the cans are always so far out of the way of what you need to tag that you're going to waste a ton of time just getting them to get started. It really is extremely frustrating to have to run back and forth between getting cans and tags across the map because I just didn't pick up one and I was just shy of one. It is so infuriating. To actually tag a spot, you have to pull the left trigger, which hilariously also resets the camera behind your back. So two completely different actions are mapped to the exact same button. Meanwhile, all of these other buttons are free and not actually doing anything. There's no real excuse for bad control design like this from any Sega title or just any title in general for that matter. It feels like amateur work, but it came out of what was a multi-million-dollar company at the time. Maybe I'm spoiled by the interactivity of tech fantasy games. Maybe I've played too many of them and I just spoiled this because I got to all of those first, but the comparison there is pretty substantial. I have played at least 15 action sports games with good control schemes that make this look like a college student's weekend project. But if that wasn't bad enough, the game is constantly bombarding you with shit. Trying to cross traffic, you'll probably get hit by a car. Trying to tag a spot, you'll probably get shot by the soldiers. Tear gassed, blown up by missiles, a lot more shit going on everywhere all the time, and the only things you can really fight back against are helicopters, as far as I can tell. There's also this Dick Gumshoe looking dude with a gun that chases you around sporadically. So more obstacles, you know, because why not? These things might appear to be obstacles, but the fact is that you can't really fight back against much of them or get rid of anything or avoid them in a lot of cases, so tagging some spots without getting screwed is really a matter of luck above everything else. No wait, I take that back. There are moments where you have to chase and tag other riders, but those are really annoying and they take way too fucking long and the other riders usually move way too fast. Speaking of tagging, that is 90% of this game, and it's all entirely done with joystick rotation QuickTime events. When you start a tag, there's no rhythm to it. There's no puzzle, there's not even any difficulty. It's all just do a QuickTime event. There are rival challenges, and you have to skate a line to win a character, but they last like a minute and none of them are difficult. I don't know. After all of the hype, I feel like I got played. Like you guys were playing a prank on me. Is this game seriously beloved by so many people? Is there some charm to the simplicity of it all that I'm missing? Because from my perspective, it's just really boring. It's a boring fetch quest, where you're constantly getting attacked by shit that you can barely defend yourself from. Just being a Sega game, or being a game from the Dreamcast, doesn't automatically make a game a masterpiece, and that is more true here than anywhere else. This game is a whole lot of fucking nothing, and I'm kind of upset at how disappointing it's been. But you know what? I could forgive all of that. I could forgive the lack of mechanics. I could forgive the frustrating bombardments. I could even forgive the fetch questing, if it wasn't for one major problem. There's no quick restart button. These fucking levels can take a long time to play. So not having a quick restart button means you have two options when you spent too long running back and forth collecting cans to tag spots. You can run out the timer and fail a full attempt, or you can waste a bunch of time returning to the mission map waiting through the loading times just to reload the level, so you're forced to watch the level intro cutscene at full length again. I'm sorry, I just cannot do it. I've used the word slog a few times in the past, and it is more fitting here than anywhere. This game takes way too long to do nothing at all. Visually, the art style is really good. I'm a huge fan of comic book visuals, and this is one of the earlier examples of cell shading being used to make low-fidelity 3D look a lot more detailed than it really is. The skater designs, the gang designs, the level designs, all really great and fun to look at, but you can't hide a bad game with great visuals. If anything, I'm actually more disappointed because all of this art was wasted on a game that didn't actually live up to the way that it looks. I've said in the past First, the visuals are merely the sandbox with which to play the game, so if the game isn't good, then it will never matter how good the visuals are. Graphics are important, but not when you don't have a game to go with them. The soundtrack here is also really good, and this is the same problem I have with the visuals. The priorities here were all completely fucked up. This game put all of the best effort forward with the graphics and sound, which ultimately left the gameplay to suffer. Putting that aside, I do love the musical theme here. It's all DJ mixes, which means you primarily get a hip-hop sound with other genres occasionally mixed in like rock and EDM. It would actually be a perfect custom set list for games like DJ Hero or Amplitude. Even though I didn't care too much for the game, I'll still walk away with the soundtrack stuck in the back of my head. It's good, whether it's a part of this or not, so I'll consider that a W. Finally, there is no real-world footage here because this isn't an action sports game expected to be based on reality to any degree. To that point, this game came out at a time when inline skating was really just seeing a popularity surge, so most of the best footage of the sport didn't even exist yet. If you're looking for amazing footage from an inline game, go check out Rolling instead. That has a great variety of real-world footage to remind you that life is too short. Certainly too short for this shit. I'm very disappointed with Jet Set Radio, so my recommendation to everybody is to go out and actually try rollerblading instead of this. Or really just anything. Go outside in general instead of playing this game. Play any other game instead. Just do something that isn't this. Raise your standards. With all of that out of the way, I'll go ahead and give Jet Set Radio a rating of 4 out of 10. It gets a few points for a few very specific reasons. The art, story, and visuals are good. It's technically playable, and the concept is good. But everything else is garbage. This was a matter of execution failure 100%. Like I said earlier, this game was hyped up by just about everybody to be a masterpiece. One of the legendary pieces of nostalgia-ware that people continuously return to. A cult classic that justified getting a sequel and more recently the announcement for a completely new game. But fucking why? You like getting smacked by 1,000 things while you're trying to do the 12 input QuickTime events? You like having tricks and grinds automatically done for you? You like having to jump at the same rail over and over because the gravity is fucking bonkers and the speed is inconsistent? What is it? What makes this game so good? Because from everything I played and everything I saw, this is easily one of the worst games I've played in a long time. There is literally nothing here. Nothing. I've been more entertained by throwing wall balls and watching paint dry. I've had more fun playing pieces of actual shovelware made by extremely small studios. I've had more fun writing code for games that I never intended to finish. I didn't have any fun here. I had a couple hours of the most boring rollerblading experience imaginable, and I'm glad to be done with it. But we're not done completely. Oh no. Next up, Jet Set Radio Future, developed by Smilebit again and released for the Xbox in 2002. Foremost, I have no fucking idea how that first game warranted a sequel or what people love about it so much, but I can at least be glad that many members of the team were carried over here. That means a much greater possibility that it's a better game. Drastic team changes often hurt more than help because you suddenly lose all of the previous development experience. Since I had a bad time with the first one, my expectations are now very low, lower than Sheol, and all I'm really looking for this time around is it better than before? Everything beyond that is irrelevant, because it shouldn't be that hard to accomplish just being better. The bar is very low. I'm going in with 3 ideal improvements I'd like to see here. Are the controls better? Are the objectives better? And is there a quick restart button? If those 3 things are the case, then this game will be infinitely better than the last one. Something I do have to point out is that the footage will be laggy. Zemu runs at full speed when OBS is not running, but it's a very CPU heavy program, and my recording rig doesn't exactly have the extra cores to balance that out right now. I did play most of the game at full speed like it was intended though. The story here is exactly the same as last time, but in the future. Truth be told, I think this is actually a good thing. The story was perfectly fine last time. A bad dude with an army's taken over the city and a bunch of skater punks armed with spray paint cans are the only hope for anybody for some reason. But in the future, the Jet Set Radio DJ returns to reprise his role, but now with gray hair and way better jokes. The career has seen a massive upgrade in style. In the first game, missions were selected through the menu in the garage. This time, there's a semi-open world shtick going on. You can freely ride around the garage hub world, and you go from place to place just by skating through the edge of every section. I really like this change. This is a level of freedom that was missing the last time around, and it might seem trivial, but it works so well. Speaking of freedom, the goals themselves have gone through a dramatic shift. Instead of just having one objective per area with a time limit restriction, there are now several things to do per area, including hitting every tag, racing, fighting groups of guards, copying actually challenging lines, and a lot more. There's so much more to do here that it actually feels like a game. We're off to a really good start. In the way of gameplay, it's very similar to the last one, but so much better that the difference is immeasurable. First of all, there's no stupid run button that you have to pull repeatedly just to maintain decent speed. You just ride around at full speed all the time. Turning fluidity has seen an improvement as well. It's just tightened enough to feel cleaner and snappier without losing the inline skating floatiness. You still automatically snap to rails, but the window has been cleaned up a lot, and you can perform a variety of extension tricks with various buttons. Wait a second, multiple trick buttons being used for something? This is an exact fix to one of my complaints. I don't see that very often. Jumping has also been improved a lot, somehow. Gravity feels a lot better this time, and the range of motion while controlling your landing in the air is much more loose, which makes it much easier to land where you actually want to. Jumping from certain slopes and rails will still automatically perform tricks, but just like with rails, you can perform multiple tricks while in the air by using various face buttons timed to a window at the end of a starting trick. Again, this is exactly what I wanted the first time. The game's main objective is still the same idea. Collect the spray cans, tag up the marked spots, but this is also just so much better. There are no more stupid QuickTime events that go on for way too long. You just speed by the marks and tag the spot. The left trigger serves two purposes like before, but it actually makes sense this time. It centers the camera and it locks onto targets, two actually camera-related things. The right trigger is used to spray, which makes a hell of a lot more sense. If you're holding 10 spray cans and you're not in range of a tag, pressing the right face button will send you flying at jet propulsion speeds. This is actually a boost, not just a glorified platformer's run button. You can still wall ride, and it's still restricted to a very, very small variety of surfaces. But because the levels are so fucking big, there are so many more of them. You can go through rooftops and all kinds of crazy, wacky alleyways and areas that just are all over the place. There's so much to see. There's also one very neat inclusion here that I didn't see in the first game. You can now grind up light poles and other objects vertically, which is mad cool. This is such a unique mechanic. It adds a completely different level of depth to traversing the rails. In the way of combat, it actually feels like combat in a way that makes sense. The idea is actually really simple. Skate check your way through a pile of soldiers and tag up their uniforms. It works insanely well, and it doesn't take too long. One of the biggest improvements here is the traffic system. You still get smacked by cars if you're careless, but now they aren't clusterfucked together at a constant, unbendable speed. Cars actually have road spacing, and they'll even stop for you if you're standing in front of them for long enough, which makes it feel a hell of a lot more forgiving. That's a good thing, because one aspect of this game is horrendously unforgiving. I learned the hard way that it's good to practice to save often, constantly, every time you do something. If you run out of health at any time, there's no game over screen, and you can't just restart the mission you were doing. You just get sent back to the title screen. That means you can lose a lot of time and progress in just a few seconds, which can definitely be frustrating if you aren't prepared for it. And there's no autosave. Thankfully, every world segment has a tag on the ground where you can stop to save your game conveniently. If those tags didn't exist, this would have made the whole game a lot more tedious. Something I failed to mention about the first game that carries over here is custom graffiti. You can still select between a variety of tags that you want to use, or you can design some graffiti with the editor, but I wasn't really thinking about it the first time because I was just frustrated with the game itself, and I wasn't thinking about it this time because I was so interested in the game itself. But it is a cool feature in both games, even if it is just cosmetic. Another thing I failed to mention about the first game is skitching, where you grab onto the back of a car to travel at a faster speed. You actually can't do that here, which is completely fine because the boost more or less does the exact same thing. You don't have to rely on purposely touching a hazard to get shit done. This is one of those moments where cutting a mechanic was an improvement. The last and most major inclusion this time around is the quick restart button for missions. I cannot stress enough just how important this is for action sports games. If you are in the middle of something and you make a mistake or you're close to failing, being able to restart as fast as you can is a huge time saver. And this game thankfully doesn't have any time limit at all for tagging or just the spots. Overall, amazingly fun. I feel like everybody was hyping up the wrong game. I didn't see anybody talk about or recommend this one, and it's never had a remaster or a re-release. This whole situation feels really backward. Visually, the style of the previous game has been kept, but there is a slight fidelity upgrade and a small change in theme and available themes in some places. Higher polygon models, higher resolution textures, better texture and shadow mapping, better lighting, some neato bloom, and a few other little changes, But also, instead of just having punk neon everywhere, you've also got industrial. It feels more dystopian, like it should have been the first time, I think. They're all large areas with a ton of skatable objects. Roofs, some of them have sub-segments, so you've got a wheel and spoke layout to explore. That really just means you have one center spot where you enter, and then a few areas are separated by linear pathways. No extra loading screens, no traveling through a weird hallway like American Wasteland, none of that shit. Speaking of that, I've been playing with Simu. There has been 0 time spent looking at loading screens. Level transitions are seamless, cutscenes start and stop without having to load more. I'm not sure what the loading times are like on original hardware, but if it's anything close to this, then that is amazing. Finally, the music is great again. Same kind of DJ vibes, but now with a sort of cyberpunk thing going on. Because it's the future, or something. Regardless, this is just something that Sega overall does well. They've got a collection of some of the greatest soundtracks in video game history. I'm not sure why they didn't just open up a record label. That probably would have been more lucrative. Or do a Konami thing, put together a specific division for rhythm games, Beimani style. They always put a great focus on how good the games sounded, going all the way back to the Master System FM sound add-on. So the lack of rhythm game stuff is pretty wild. Back on topic though, the voices and sound effects are also great, so there's not much to say there. It's a comic book yelling mixed with high energy riffing. There's a lot of charm to it. It doesn't pierce the ears. It does its job. Overall, sound really good. With all of that out of the way, I'll go ahead and give Jet Set Radio Future a rating of 9 out of 10. I'll reiterate something I said a moment ago. Everybody was hyping up the wrong game. I might not see the appeal of the original Jet Set Radio outside of people who grew up with it, but I can see the appeal for this one for just being a really good game. It's more fun, it's more complete, it's more free, and there's one perfect way to describe it. This is the perfect way to make a sequel. For developers who play games for research, look to this to find some insight. This is everything that needed to be improved on, and every single one of my biggest complaints about the first game was fixed. I'm not sure why it doesn't get talked about more often, but I'm glad I spent the time with it. This is one I'll be able to look back on fondly. It's not a perfect game. There are some bugs and jank that could have been ironed out still, but overall, very solid, perfect sequel. Now that I'm done with that, I can't promise that my next video will come out faster than this one did. I can try, but no guarantees. Speaking of the next video, I'm in a Sega kind of mood, so next time, we're going to take a look at many Sonic games. I'm not talking about a 5 games video or a trilogy or something. I'm talking about the entire 16-bit Sonic era, including all of the weird ones. That should be a blast. After that, I've been putting it off for way too long. It's been sitting on the back burner, and it's time to let it out. It's finally time to cover Skate 2. That's a series I'm trying to stretch out because it isn't really that huge, and I want to say as much about all of them as I can individually. So until next time, thank you, and have a nice day.